And, when we come through times like, especially this last season, the weather's been crazy in Kentucky. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but storms and wind and hail and everything, just crazy stuff. And I love rainy days. Now, I can't do a steady diet of rainy days, but I do love a rainy day. Over this last week, though, it was nice to see the sun a little bit yesterday for just a few minutes, and it went back away. But, rainy days are fun. I enjoy them. I love, the sound of the water on the roof. But the reason I like them so much is because I can stay dry during a rainy day. I can stay inside. I can look through my window and see the rain. I can hear the rain. It's nice and soothing. It's comforting. But I'm not standing out in the middle of the rain getting soaking wet. And during those times, I really don't enjoy it that much. But when you're inside and you're protected, it's a really nice thing. And the key is that we have a roof over our head. There's something that protects us. There's something that shelters us. There's something that keeps us safe from all of the elements that would want to tear us down. And today we're going to talk about that in the concept of marriage. Because we've talked about the foundation, that our marriage is built on the foundation of a covenant relationship. We've entered into a covenant with each other, and that keeps us from going anywhere. That keeps us solid, and it keeps us right in the right spot. And in addition to that, we framed in our house with all these Christian virtues, kindness and compassion and humility and meekness. And we've started to build our home with the things that make a great home. And there's a big difference in the building products that you use. And so if we use quality things to build our home, we're going to end up with a home that's sturdier, it's a stronger house, and we're also going to end up with a home that's more enjoyable. That because we have those virtues in place, that our home is a place that we want to live. And we framed in our house with that, but now we need a key piece. Because if we left it there, which a lot of people do when they talk about marriage, they can have a great foundation and they can put good things in there, but if we leave it there, there's one huge problem as we look up, right? There's nothing on top. There's nothing to protect us when the storms come, when life gets a little harder, when we go through the tougher things in life. We need something that's bigger and better than us to protect us and shelter us from that. And in Matthew chapter 19, we're going to look at what that roof is in a marriage relationship. Now, let me say this. The roof is really important. And not only the whole roof, but every little piece of it. A small leak can do a lot of damage. If you look up right here in the middle of the auditorium, there's a little water spot up there. And the funny thing is that's the second water spot that's been there. The first one took down a lot of tile with it. Most of the seats in the middle got just showered with ceiling tiles at one point because we had this little bitty leak. It couldn't have been big, or else we would have had huge amounts of water in here. It had to be just very, very small. It took them weeks to find it, so it had to be really small. But that little bitty leak did so much damage. And I'm sure you guys have had similar experiences. If there's a small leak in the roof, it could do all kinds of damage within the context of the inside of the building. So it can't just be any old roof. We can't just put anything on top of us to shelter us and protect us. It's got to be something that's the utmost quality to last a lifetime. And here's where we're going to find that in Matthew chapter 19, verses 5 and 6. And Jesus is talking, and he says this, "For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate." Now, if you've been in church for any length of time, chances are in your wedding vows you had that last phrase plugged in there somewhere. If not, you've been to a wedding where they've said that. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man separate, or let not man, if you have the King James, let not man tear asunder or something. It's this concept of that. And we focus so much on the second half of that phrase because it's important in our culture. There's so many things that try to tear our marriages apart. But this morning, I want to focus on the front half of that phrase. The idea that, therefore, God has joined together. That's a whole different ballgame. It's not just us that we decided to get married and we signed a piece of paper and filed it with the government and we're all good. There's something special that happens in the context of marriage. There is a joining together. There is a work of God that happens when you commit to someone in the bond of marriage. God's work is there. And this morning, we're going to talk about that being our sheltering concept. The roof over everything, the roof that holds it all together, is God's work in your marriage. We could leave it off there with just good stuff and we could have an okay time, but to have the kind of marriage that we are really looking for, to have the kind of marriage that I believe God wants us to have, it requires much more than just hard work on our part. It requires a divine act of God, His work involved in our marriage. And so we need this strong roof. It can't just be anything. It's got to be a work of God. And so this morning, we're going to kind of unpack this a little bit. What does a work of God look like in your marriage? What does it look like when God shows up and it's not just two people who really love each other building this foundation together? What does it look like when God Himself is a part of our marriage relationships? And I think that there's a whole different paradigm when we start looking at this, when we start viewing this as God's work and not just our decision. Because God wants to do something in our marriages. He wants to strengthen your marriage. He wants to encourage you in your marriage. He wants you to have a godly marriage, and that comes from Him. That's a divine work in our mundane lives, that God reaches in and He does something that only He can do.